the reason why Free Speech TV is premiering April 20th, that's the 4th anniversary of the Deepwater Horizon explosion, and I thought that it's about time that the American public got the real story instead of the usual baloney about it being from BP and the government. It was just an unforeseen accident. In fact, 11 guys were incinerated, 600 miles of coastline destroyed. It was homicide, corporate negligent homicide. The real story is that 17 months before the Deepwater Horizon blew out on a Transocean BP rig, BP had an identical blowout on another Transocean rig, but on the other side of the world in the Caspian Sea. Now, I know this because I had a tipster who got the word to us through coded means that this was not the first blowout. This was not. And they had the same cause. It's now been determined that BP's use of quick dry cement, you heard the phrase, watching cement dry. Well, that's very expensive when you're renting a rig for $500,000 a day. So BP turned the cement into kind of a milkshake by putting nitrogen bubbles into the cement so it dries quickly. But in offshore, heavy pressure areas, like the Caspian Sea or the Gulf of Mexico, it could blow out this milkshake cement. And that's exactly what happened. First in the Caspian Sea, 17 months later in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, here's the thing, Tom. They covered it up. BP covered it up in the first blowout in the Caspian Sea. If they hadn't covered it up, there's no doubt in my mind that the regulators would have said, you cannot use that money-saving, penny-pinching, cheapo, quick-dry cement in the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, the vice president of BP for the Gulf, David Rainey, testified after the Caspian Sea blowout, but before the Gulf blowout, that that there'd never been a dangerous, threatening event involving offshore drilling. He testified under oath. By the way, Rainey is now facing indictment for lying to Congress, obstruction of Congress, but unfortunately not for the lie that he told that cost 11 men their lives. And the reason why he's not indicted for the more serious offense is the offense he's been indicted for is lying about the amount of oil that BP has, the amount of BP sludge pouring into the Gulf of Mexico. He tried to hide about 90% of it. But He never was nailed for the first one because it turns out that our government was complicit in the cover-up. How do I know that? Because of a courageous soldier named Private Bradley Chelsea Manning in the WikiLeaks documents. In this film, you'll see I go across to the nation of Azerbaijan in the Caspian Sea, and I get arrested trying to find my witnesses to the original blowout. You can see me get arrested because they took the cameras, but in the film, but they didn't take my little pen, which had one of those little Austin Power cameras in the pen. But we couldn't get all our evidence. And then I come back to London. I work with The Guardian. And inside the WikiLeaks document, the United States ambassador had secret meetings with BP because Chevron and Exxon didn't know why they weren't getting their split of the money from the Caspian Sea. And BP said, shh, there was a blowout. And that was in the WikiLeaks cables from our ambassador.
From Chelsea Manning.
To the Bush. It was at that time. This is a transition just as the Bush was leaving. Right. Condi Rice was the Secretary of State. So Chevron had gone to her and her people, because if you remember, Condi Rice was a member of the board of directors of Chevron. In fact, there was a tanker.
I had forgotten that.
So Chevron went to Condi and said, "Where's our money from BP?" And that's when BP admitted that there was a blowout of this cheap cement.
Amazing.
But the State Department, the two oil companies, Chevron, Exxon, and of course BP itself, covered it up, lied under oath to the United States Congress, because I want to tell you, the Department of Interior did not want to let them drill that deep in the Gulf of Mexico. They said it was inherently dangerous. These guys said it's not dangerous. We have not had a problem in 50 years. You see this testimony in the film Vultures and Vote Rustlers. And by the way, just this Easter weekend, in commemoration of those 11 men who died because of corporate negligent homicide, My foundation is releasing the film for download for free. And I know that the Hartman crowd, this is one of the 8 stories in the film, Vultures and Vote Hustlers.
Wow. And people can find this over at gregpalast.com as well as over at freespeech.org. Right. Greg, everything you just described is the past. And, there's some pretty horrible stuff there in the past. But they, just in the last few weeks, correct me if I'm wrong, BP has resumed drilling in the Gulf. Are they still using that kind of phony baloney cement?
That's one of the problems. There's no prohibition on it.
You're kidding.
No even now.
The stuff that has killed these guys?
The formula. But the big thing, and here's what I'm worried about. The Obama administration 2 weeks ago granted BP the right to return to the Gulf and, in fact, gave them, allowed them to bid, and they won the right to drill in the tract right next to where the Deepwater horizon went down. My problem with BP is this. If you remember, I also did another story. I was the chief investigator of fraud and racketeering on the Exxon Valdez case 25 years ago. I said the main culprit was not Exxon, despite the name Exxon on the ship. It was BP, because BP was responsible for having the emergency equipment and all that rubber stuff and the suckers and all the equipment you should have when there's a blowout. Right. They didn't have it in Alaska, and they didn't have it in the Gulf of Mexico. You don't see any of those, and you don't see the rig being surrounded. They could have captured a tremendous amount of that oil. But there was no attempt to contain that oil for 4 days until President Obama declared national emergency, and the Navy began putting out the rubber skirts to try to contain the oil. 4 days. BP had promised, they're constantly promising that they're going to be good boys and they're going to spend a lot of money for safety equipment. And they don't. Safety equipment is expensive.
Right.
And
instead, they give that money to their executives and their stockholders.
Serial corporate wrongdoer. This is one of the big problems. So they, in fact, the containment plan is an oil spill. Same Alaska's in the Gulf.